World leaders are back at the United Nations for the first time in 2 years with a formidable agenda of escalating crises to tackle, including the still raging COVID-19 pandemic and a relentlessly warming planet. Other pressing issues are rising US-China tensions, Afghanistan's unsettled future under its new Taliban rulers, and ongoing conflicts in Yemen, Syria and Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region. Last year, no leaders came to the United Nations because the coronavirus was sweeping the globe, so all their addresses were pre-recorded. This year, the General Assembly offered leaders a choice of coming to New York or remaining online. And more than 100 heads of state and government decided to appear in person in the General Assembly Hall. In his opening speech, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that countries must bridge the great divide across the world to have a comprehensive agenda for peace. Can this year's General Assembly create the opportunity and obligation to act against all these global challenges? The new Turkish house building in New York City was designed and constructed as a symbolic skyscraper to reflect Turkish culture, history and diversity. Our following infographic has more. Speaking at the inauguration of the 36-story Turkish house in New York on Monday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan took the occasion to reiterate his support for a reform of the United Nations to reflect the new realities of the global order.
Gururluyuz. Çünkü devletimize, milletimize kalıcı bir eser daha kazandırıyoruz.
On Monday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan inaugurated the 36-story Turkevi Center in New York.
Türkevi binamız Birleşmiş Milletler'e, çok taraflılığa, adalete ve barışa olan inancımızın da bir sembolüdür.
It is an enormous pleasure to join you at the inauguration of the new Turkish house and to recognize the continued excellent cooperation between Turkey and the United Nations. Turkey is engaged across the spectrum of our work as we deal with challenges from the climate crisis to long-standing threats to peace and security.
The building was purchased from American tech firm IBM in 1977 and served as Ankara's permanent mission to the UN and Consulate General until 2013, when renovations began. The building, which carries traditional Turkish architectural motifs, especially from the Seljuk era, rises to the sky in the shape of a tulip and can be seen from downtown Manhattan, the East River and Long Island City. In addition to serving as a diplomatic building, it will also host residences for diplomats, as well as an auditorium that can hold up to 200 people.
Türkiye, Birleşmiş Milletler'in kurucu üyelerinden biri olarak uluslararası barışın ve güvenliğin tesisi için gösterilen çabalara aktif katkı sağlıyor.
The number of people fleeing wars, violence, persecution and human rights violations is at record levels. And I know Turkey will continue doing its utmost with the support of the international community that has not been as high as it should. And I know that this represents an act of solidarity that concerns us all.
The United Nations is an international organization established to prevent the repetition of wars that broke out in the first half of the 20th century and to eliminate threats to international peace and security. Turkey pursues a proactive approach towards the UN, striving to contribute effectively to all major issues on its agenda. Benefiting from its membership in various groups and organizations, Turkey makes every effort to play a constructive and reconciliatory role in the UN.
Dünya 5'ten büyüktür diyerek çok kutuplu, çok merkezli, çok kültürlü, daha kapsayıcı ve daha adil bir küresel düzeni savunuyoruz.
I'm now joined live from Ankara in Turkey by Gal Luft, who's a security analyst and professor with Ostim Teknik University. Gal, thank you so much for joining us here again today on The Edge. The opening ceremony of Turkish House was held in New York yesterday. It's just opposite the United Nations headquarters. What is the importance of the Turkish delegation and President Erdogan being able to go and meet with other world leaders in New York for this year's UNGA?
Well, first of all, it's a welcome development that you can go and meet people in person as opposed to telephonically or via Zoom. And we can see that more and more leaders are becoming more comfortable with going around and meeting. There will be several other meetings this month and next month at the G20 in Rome. And I think most of the leaders will attend in person. So there's a great importance of being able to communicate. Leaders feel more comfortable when they talk to each other in person rather than via the internet when they don't know who may be listening to their conversations. So I think it really lends itself to a much more comfortable environment in which leaders can be more upfront and more honest with each other without having to fear that their telephone conversation will be leaked. And that's sort of going back to traditional diplomacy. Of course, it will take time before this pandemic really is eviscerated, but I think that we're beginning to see more and more opportunities for leaders to engage in the way that they used to before, and that's good news.
Absolutely, and I imagine a lot of discussions go on amongst the delegations behind the scenes, so this hopefully will help things to move forward this year in a way which they maybe weren't able to last year. But diplomacy I think is a key word probably for every meeting of the UNGA, but in the speeches we've already heard, and shortly, probably just after this programme, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will be giving his speech to the UNGA. But in the speeches we've already heard, for example, from US President Joe Biden, he spoke of this being a decisive moment in which the United States is open to diplomacy and wanting to engage with the whole world. So the importance of diplomacy is ever more important today than ever before, is it not?
Well, yes and no, and it really depends on what you define as diplomacy. And President Biden spoke, as you mentioned in his speech about an hour ago, about relentless diplomacy.
Right.
But diplomacy cuts in both ways. You know, deciding to abandon Afghanistan without consulting with your allies is not exactly a great example of the way the diplomacy should work. Or going behind the French and starting a whole new tripartite sort of quasi-alliance without notifying your closest allies is not exactly how diplomacy should work, right? So if we're seeing those kind of things among countries that consider themselves to be allies, you can only imagine how it works with countries that are not that aligned. And I think that there is and that's typical of the UN gathering, there is such a huge disconnect between the rhetorics and the platitudes and what is actually happening in reality. Every year they come and speak about the need to cooperate and engage in diplomacy and make love, not war, and kumbaya. But then when you measure this against actions on the ground and the way that many of those countries conduct themselves, the differences are quite stark. So I'm not particularly impressed with the rhetoric and the speeches. I'm looking at their action, and when you look at their action, there is very little to be proud about.
In fact, to complete your quote, Joe Biden said relentless diplomacy in place of relentless war. Now, I imagine that as he's on home turf, a lot of his speech probably aimed at a domestic audience as much as the leaders at the UNGA. The figures he quoted as the number of vaccines, for example, that the United States have distributed around the world is still sorely lacking in the number of vaccines that the African continent, for example, is needing. Do you think this conference will bring together, as UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres has called for in his keynote speech, for more cohesive action on the COVID pandemic?
Yes, of course, this is what they call for, but that doesn't happen on the ground, and that's what I tried to say before, that it's a huge disconnect between the declaration and the intentions, which are good, and the abilities of countries to cooperate. And what I think we have two issues here. One is the structural problem within the UN, and President Erdogan has been the most vocal advocate of change in the UN system. When he says the world is bigger than five, he means that 5 countries that have the veto power in the Security Council are calling the shots, essentially. And those 5 powers are not really representative of the current power configuration of the world. Maybe they're more fitting of the 1940s and 1950s, but not where we are today. I mean, India, the #1 democracy in the world, is not one of the 5. There's not one representative of the Latin America. Japan is not part of the 5. So I think that as long as this structure exists, it will be very difficult to reach agreements. Now, this is getting much, much worse over the past couple of years, because 2 out of the 5, namely Russia and China, are increasingly aligned against the other 3, namely United States, France, and the UK. And the 5 members of the Security Council are a representative of the sort of the new Cold War that we are facing. And when you have such a divide in which each country of the 5 can veto the others, and can prevent Security Council resolutions from being passed, there's nothing much that you can agree on anymore, and therefore the UN has lost so much of its influence. Let me just remind the audience that General Assembly resolutions are non-binding, so they maybe represent the mood or the feeling of the international community, but they're not binding, so there's no teeth there. And as I said, the Security Council is so flawed and so unrepresentative that really the whole organization of the UN has lost so much of its influence, and it begs for a major reform. The problem is you cannot reform the organization when the guard dogs, namely the 5 permanent members, are the ones that will prevent it from happening, because that will eat into their power and influence. There's no reason why France and the UK should be 2 of the 5 permanent members. There's no reason for that. That's bygone era of imperial influence. They're no longer empires. They're just middle countries.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, and indeed, from in the last week, we've seen how even the tripartite of the US, UK, and France, who one would expect to be tightly bound together, have entered the spat over the AUKUS deal in Australia, with the promise, with a deal to provide nuclear submarines to the Indo-Pacific. So that's another problem that's coming out. Now, we're talking about rhetoric from the speeches. What do you anticipate from the Turkish president? He's obviously going to talk about reformation of the United Nations. Will that have an impact on the other members?
I think so, because somebody needs to take the lead on this issue and repeat and repeat and repeat and lobby and get more, more countries to support the idea of UN reform. Well, he is the first one to point it out, and to point it out in a very vocal and passionate way. And now the big job is to collect as many countries as possible to echo his ideas, and maybe to even form within the UN a constituency of country, of like a lobby group within the UN that will work collectively to change, to reform the organization. The other thing that I think the president is very keen on is to raise and be a voice for the refugee problem. Mm-hmm. We have a huge refugee problem in the world today, and Turkey has been on the receiving end of millions of those refugees. Now we have the Afghanistan also could be a main source of refugees. Nobody is talking seriously today about national reconstruction. We have several countries in the Middle East, Afghanistan being one of them, but there is also Yemen and Syria and Libya and others that need to undergo massive infrastructure rebuilding, which is akin to the Marshall Plan for Europe after the Second World War. And I listened to President Biden talking about the need to invest in infrastructure, but then he said yes. I mean, he didn't say it the way I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said we need to invest in infrastructure, but not the kind of infrastructure that China is doing, because they're doing it in a corrupt way. You got to do it our way, but we don't really have money, so let's do it with the private sector, which means that nothing will happen. So that kind of circular rhetoric negates the whole idea, the tremendous need for infrastructure development in the very same countries that have been destroyed over the past decade and are begging for infrastructure investment. So to go out there and to say we have this huge problem, let's solve it, but let's not do it with the only country that basically can do it fast and on the cheap, is kind of, I think, is a little bit disingenuous.
Absolutely. Well, actions do speak louder than words, and I quite take your point that there are a lot of platitudes being spewed out by several leaders at this conference. But we wait to see the reaction to the President Erdogan's speech, which hopefully will start the ball rolling for reform. Gal Luft, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Thank you. Our Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan discussed regional and international security challenges with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson at the 36-storey Turkish house in New York on Monday.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is continuing his diplomacy traffic with several world leaders on the sidelines of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. President Erdogan met with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres in the 36-storey Turkish house in New York. Erdogan and Guterres discussed the regional and global security challenges, Afghanistan and irregular migration in particular. Turkey gives utmost importance to the UN as the only global organization that establishes norms for dealing with the problems multilaterally, protecting international peace and security, and strengthening human rights, as well as representing the international legitimacy. President Erdogan also welcomed British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the Turkish house. The Turkish President and British Premier exchanged views on all aspects of bilateral relations between Turkey and the United Kingdom. Erdogan and Johnson also called for international cooperation to deal with the regional and global security issues. Speaking at the 11th Turkey Investment Conference held by the Turkey-US Business Council, President Erdogan also underlined the importance of bilateral cooperation between Turkey and the United States to address the regional and global security challenges.
Türkiye ve Amerika Birleşik Devletleri iki güçlü stratejik ortak ve 70 yıllık müttefiktir. Bu çok özel ve sağlam temellere dayanan işbirliğimiz yıllardır dünyanın birçok coğrafyasında barışa, istikrara ve güvenliğe katkı sağlamıştır. Son dönemde yaşanan kritik gelişmeler ülkelerimiz arasındaki stratejik ortaklığın önemini ve kıymetini bir kez daha göstermiştir.
I'm now joined live from Istanbul in Turkey by Hake Ocal, who's a journalist. Hake, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge.
Thank you, Andy.
Diplomacy, negotiations, discussions, the 76th UN General Assembly is underway. Speeches have already begun. What, for you, is particularly important about this year's meeting?
Oh, first of all, they are doing it in a hybrid way as we do in the school. Some people are online, some people are face-to-face, and so it is a restart of the diplomacy, face-to-face diplomacy. This is important. Second, President Erdogan has gone there with having some meat around his concept of world is greater than 5 idea. Mm-hmm. And this time he is going to speak about the United Nations being at least 100 days late to address the pandemic issues, and also he is going to voice the concerns that many people, at least 1/3 of the world population, didn't receive proper vaccination. Yet, it's been almost 2 years now, and the people on Earth cannot vaccinate ourselves in a proper way. Yes, Mr. Biden today addressed the issue a little bit, but again, he sent the whole issue to the hands of private companies, and we know private companies are in this business to sell vaccination, not to get the people vaccinated. So the importance from my perspective is that Mr. Erdogan will have some strong arguments this time for his call for a reform within the United Nations system.
Well, and particularly on that note, he's going to be, I imagine that we have a fairly good idea about what his address, which will be happening very shortly, will be saying, because he's written a book that he's going to be presenting to all the delegates at the UNGA,
yes,
and saying a fairer world is possible. This obviously is a huge. This is the contents of his speech making a huge offer to the United Nations, saying that we believe in the United Nations, but it's time to change. What are the key things about Erdogan's proposal?
If we look back a little bit, and the United Nations came into being as a mechanism between the two worlds run by United States and their allies, and Soviet Union and their allies. The existing structure now is based on the balance, not on the idea of fairness. This organization is not trying to develop any fair idea or any fair exchange or any fairness at all. Erdogan, on the other hand, he's not alone in his call for a fairer world, but right now he is the spokesman of how can I say, revolutionary people within the United Nations, and they will more and more will voice their strong opposition to the existing situation. This is not going to work. The 100 days into pandemic and nothing is happening, and Afghanistan is. Everybody is witnessing how the regime was changed in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is tumbling into as a very large hunger. There are no foods, there are no enough clean water for the people, and Taliban is not in a position to provide those because it is not a recognized government of Afghanistan right now. Nobody is going to recognize them if they insist on doing this the old Al-Qaeda way. Unfortunately, they say they severed all these ties to Al-Qaeda, but the way they are working is obviously Al-Qaeda's isolation from the world. They have to change their ways. They have to start thinking about the welfare of the Afghan people. And this is also an important issue. Turkey is going to start helping Afghan people soon, and Erdogan is going to, in a second, I hope, he will be on the podium and he will be talking about it. These are important issues, and you don't need anything else. I mean, yes, we need a new organization within the United Nations system to voice those concerns and everything, but no, big revolutions would usually take time, and this is one major reformation movement within the United Nations system, and it will take time.
It's a very important step, however, isn't it? And one other thing that's particularly interesting, and the importance of the in-person meeting and this opportunity to present this speech and indeed the book to the people, is that I think it will change the perception of President Erdogan and Turkey around the world. I hope it will. It's very interesting how many media outlets have totally misrepresented both the country and the leader. Just one quote here from the book. He says, "At a time when the world seems devoid of compassion, we must be the champions of mercy and the voice of people's conscience." This is something that one maybe, if you just followed the news reports over the last years about Turkey, might not have expected to come from here, if people who don't know the real country. And yet this is a very key statement about why, for the good of all humankind, the United Nations needs to be revamped. Is this a message which will be well received from the other members at the UNGA?
Yes, it will. Of course it will. I mean, look, United States of America recently started a new alliance in the middle of the Indo-Pacific region, and they are going to pour billions of dollars, at least 30 billion US dollars, going to those nuclear submarines that England and United States are going to provide Australia, which is, on the other hand, angering Europe, France, because their own deal was went bad. And right now, in that area, around this Indo-Pacific region, millions of people are going to bed hungry. Millions of kids do not have proper schooling. They don't have enough textbooks or anything. Yes, Mr. Biden a second ago mentioned such things, that, and he paid some sort of lip service to the global issues like that. But again, he came back to the idea of some sort of alliance against China. Mm-hmm. He has some sort of fixation on this China thing. Yes, China is not belligerent, I don't want to say, but not hostile, but not very friendly country to the other nations around. They are building artificial islands and putting arms there and everything. It is scary. However, on the other hand, those nuclear submarines in the hands of Australia are not going to do anything to prevent Chinese expansionism, Chinese development. China is becoming the most powerful nation on earth, and the United States, or the free world, as they used to call say the Western world, can oppose this development, creating new alliances to feed the people, to improve the people's lives there. I mean, again, I am coming back to this vaccination issue because it is important. It is in our lives every second. We have our masks all the time and everything. But people in some areas in Africa do not have proper face mask to protect themselves. We even don't have proper statistics about the spread of this pandemic in many nations around the globe. So these things, these developments, and Erdogan's response to them will find hearing ears. I think it is not going to fall onto deaf ears as it used to do for the last 2 or 3 years. But now the world is much ready to receive these passionate, compassionate messages from Turkish president.
Because the world has indeed changed even over the last 18 months because of the pandemic, hasn't it? We've seen literally, as you mentioned, last year everything was online. Now we're going to hybrid system I like your phrase, the hybrid learning system for the UNGA. Let's hope they do learn. So the world has changed. People realise are beginning to understand, hopefully, their interconnected responsibilities, which is another one of the themes, the justice that needs to be delivered to everybody around the world. Yes. And this, as you say, refers to COVID-19, but also, as Antonio Guterres brought up in his speech, climate change. This is another issue which will the General Assembly be able to come to some agreement over the way forward there, do you think? Those
developed nations are not offering anything tangible. I mean, look, United States was withdrawn from this Paris Agreement. Thank God they are coming back now. However, they are not offering anything tangible, anything that we can, as the people of the earth, can benefit from it. 1 more degree, 1 Celsius degree increase in the global climate temperature, at least 10 nations are going to disappear from the face of the earth because water is coming, occupy their land. And many countries are going to lose valuable agricultural areas to the water of the ocean. And what are we doing? What are they doing? They are telling us, the developing people, developing nations, we ruin your world by developing, by producing those chlorofluorocarbons. You don't do it. Don't develop. Don't repeat our mistakes. We did it, but you are not supposed to do it. Well, how can you say this to me when you ruined my climate and now I need to feed my people, I need to create my own factories, I need to release my own fluorocarbons into the atmosphere, and you are telling me, no, you are, this is the famous fable of, you know, the fox was drinking the water from the upriver, and he wanted to accuse the poor lamb. He was down the stream that he was ruining the water. So this is a very important issue, and President Erdogan, I am sure, is going to voice his concerns about it too. Yes, we, as a concerned, as a responsible people, we all should be acting responsibly as far as atmosphere and the huge hole is concerned. But still, it is up to United States of America, France, England, Germany to take the lead in this fight to protect the environment.
And to protect the world. And one of the other issues that President Erdogan brings up, and will, I'm sure, bring up in his speech, is that of Islamophobia. And again, the 5 permanent members don't include any Muslim majority countries. How is he going to broach the topic of Islamophobia to the General Assembly, and why is this important?
Islamophobia is a matter of justice in the world. I mean, yes, some people might have some ideas looking into, for instance, the drama created in Afghanistan by Al-Qaeda, not to sending girls to schools. Even today, they say, yeah, they will recall the school system and everything, but still they didn't do it. And they are acting as if Al-Qaeda is pulling the strings there. Anyway, I'm not trying to justify anybody's Islamophobia, but nobody is doing anything to differentiate from Islamophobia from bad examples they are taking. Some people are taking from Islamic countries. Yes, there are some public policy implementations in some Islamic countries that are not truly compatible with the Western understanding, and like this example of girls going to school in Afghanistan and other countries. You can criticize them, but they are not doing this because of their religion or as the legitimate tenets of their religion or anything, but that is what they are doing. It is totally regional thing. It is totally sometimes nationalistic, male chauvinistic implementations, and we should, as a world, differentiate this from true religion. It is not the religion.
That differentiation can only happen if there are discussions going on, so that people can discuss the reasons and talk. That's why this is so important. Hakkı Öcal, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on The Edge. With any moment now, we're looking forward to hearing the Turkish president speaking. Thank you so much for joining us.
Let's listen to him. Thank you, sir.
Now, our analysts have provided their insights on this year's UN General Assembly. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. And the United Nations has seen its share of challenges in recent years. The Security Council stalemate on Syria, an unprecedented refugee and migrant crisis, a global health crisis that's yet to be reined in, and crippling funding cuts. All these are signs the United Nations budget is not growing, but the challenges it faces are. Therefore, countries need to work together to address these challenges. Indeed, as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan proposes, the United Nations needs to evolve because a fairer world is possible. I'll leave you now with a look at how, by working together, the United Nations can bring an end to the pandemic.